Got it. And so when, we're talking about that, basically A or B kind of saw a way to improve the program so that we are not incentivizing the highest earners in the state. Now, when we talked about the caps, now is that being fully implemented now, or was that just a policy that was just adopted?
The cap is in the guidelines, and we are ramping up the program changes to implement it now. Okay. And again, thank you for the clarification. The reference I made to the $250,000, that was the cap in CVRP. We feel strongly that these are improvements to the program, and I think where the market is today, in terms of zero-emission vehicles gaining market access and penetration, has allowed us to begin to make improvements to these programs.
Now, could you share with us how the ARB came up with, because it's $250,000 for an individual, it's half a $500,000, $500,000 for a household. How did ARB come up with those levels? Because and the areas I represent, that's really high.
Sure. Yeah, this was not a trivial endeavor for us by any means, and again, let me first say that we were very interested in making sure that whatever cap was selected was not going to be disruptive to the program, because again, what we're trying to do is this broad transformation of the fleet, right? We want to essentially come up with a better alternative to combustion, and we need to reach as many Californians as we can. Having that in mind, there was no answer that we could go and grab from another program. So we undertook a public and inclusive process. As you can imagine, there's a number of stakeholders that work with us on a regular basis. We went through this process, and we essentially looked at Prop 30 income limits, and through this process determined that these income levels were, one, appropriate to make sure that we can continue, so that we can start to focus the program more effectively, but also not too stringent so that you end up disrupting the market too much.
Okay. So the reliance on Prop 30 as basically the guidelines for this. Okay, something that maybe we can, as legislators, kind of revisit. But, historically you were talking about, and the whole nexus for the hearing is how this program is helping low and moderate income families. So historically, you've said in the past, it has incentivized probably people we shouldn't have, or all by perspective. But so how much can we say has gone to low-income families? How much of this rebate for just this program has actually gone to low-income families?
So let me give you the statistics specifically for our replacement program, the EF&P Plus Hub, which is specifically focused on the lower-income consumers. But let me address your question. Please. Back on the income caps, we fully anticipate we are at the beginning of implementing this change in the program, and we fully anticipate that in the future, as the market grows, as more models are available, and we begin to develop a used ZEV market, the income caps are going to be revised, and we fully expect that the revisions are going to be towards lower caps, because again, the market is going to grow. Now, to accelerate that process, if you will, that's why we went to the EF&P Plus Up program and specifically designed a program that targets low income and moderate income consumers. And I gave you the definition of low income is based on the poverty level. But as far as how much money we have put in that program, we have issued specifically over 360 rebates that have gone to participants in the San Joaquin Valley and the South Coast that qualify for EF&P Plus Up at the different levels. We have a low-income level, we have a moderate-income level, and we have above moderate-income level. So we have participation, and again, you want to give the consumer the choice of vehicle. And so far, again, consumers are buying battery electrics, plug-in hybrids, and conventional hybrids. as I said, it's been over 360 rebates that have gone for this program in 2 districts. And one of the things that we're currently working on is we want to expand the program to other air districts in California.
And just for the committee, when we're talking about the Plus Up program, how much of dollar amount, I mean, on average, is that?
So the average incentive on the Plus Up program has been $6,800, $6,805 to be exact. The average cost of that replacement vehicle that is participating in the program has been $19,660. So the out-of-pocket expense for the participant is on the order of $12,000. So again, $6,800 is the incentive specifically designed for our lower-income consumers. And depending on the vehicle choice, this can be coupled and stacked with some of the other incentives, like CVRP. If we can get into a situation where a person can buy a new EV, they would qualify for both.
Got it. And just for a matter of perspective, how much money does ARB allocate for the Clean Vehicle Rebate Program, and how much does it allocate for this Plus Up program that's actually designed for low and moderate income families?
Certainly, the allocation for CVRP, because it's a program that has more history, has been greater. Whereas CFMP Plus Up, we're just starting the program. But to get to your question, specific numbers, CVRP we've allocated $206 million. In our EFMP Plus Up program specifically, I think we are at approximately $12-13 million. And again, the difference has to do with the fact that CVRP has been around for longer. It's a different program. Now we're shifting the dynamics of where we want to allocate our investments. And again, this is the beginning, and all signs are positive, and we hope to expand it.
Okay. Yeah. So if the program's $206 million, a Plus Up program specifically designed for low and moderate income families, it's only at 12 and 13. Seems like there's a lot of room for improvement there to me, and maybe to my colleagues. I don't know if they want to chime in as well. Let me just ask a question, because you brought up the programs, and I've actually been out there where people come in and they line up for hours with their vehicles to get smog tested and then see if they can qualify for a program. One of the issues that a couple of the families that I talked to in line brought up to me was they had pickup trucks. And, you know, they're waiting in line, they get through, and then somebody tells them, like, well, we don't know if your pickup truck qualifies, but we'll put you into, like you had mentioned earlier, like a Volt or a Leaf. And they're like, well, my pickup truck, I need it for work. I can't go from pickup truck to a car. So is there a specific program, and I would imagine this is true out in Lancaster, Pomona, or other places throughout the entire state, can we put them into a truck? Is it the same way? Because, you know, I was told, or these families told me that, you know, no, they kept pushing a car, but I need the truck for work. And that, I don't know if that's a rule issue or not, but if you can address that.
Yeah, certainly, and I appreciate the comment, and the short answer is, unfortunately, there is no truck option right now. And again, that has to do not with our program, but just the reflection of what the car market has to offer when it comes to advanced technologies. Essentially, what that means is you don't have too many car makers bringing to the market hybrid trucks or plug-in hybrid trucks or zero-emission trucks yet, right? So what you see is essentially a reflection of the intent of the program is still to help us with this broader transformation of the fleet away from combustion. There are other programs that have a long history in the state that are focused more narrowly on just helping people get into better cars or other options. But when it comes to EFMP Plus Up, we're still trying to optimize the investment so that we can still begin this transformation of the fleet. And the choices of technologies that qualify, that are available, today is still limited, but things are changing. I mean, things are beginning to evolve, and that's, again, a reflection of the broader market. You know, I mean, this year you've got 37 new models of zero-emission vehicles on the market. That is up from 25 last year. So I am confident that we are not too far from a future where you will have some of these choices.
All right, but if we have, one family, I was talking in particular, I think it was a 1983 truck, right? And they made a good point to me. They said, look, I have an old vehicle. I came here, I got the flyer, I wanted to do something positive. If there's an incentive to help me get into another vehicle, that's great. And I said, yeah, let's see what program can assist. But now you're telling me, well, we can't put them into another truck, even though they need that for work. But wouldn't we be in agreement that a newer truck would have less emissions than him driving his 1983 truck? And why wouldn't, is there any program? Maybe it's not the Plus Up program. Is there any other program? Because we know most greenhouse gases will come from mobile sources. And if the goal is to reduce greenhouse gases, how are we helping these individuals? Because I would venture to say, I know in my area, I don't want to speak for other members, but a lot of our low-income families do have trucks. They do rely on that for work. I come from a heavily ag and oil district, and so they need that for work. So is there any other program, maybe it's not the Plus Up program, that ARB is looking at this? Because we do know that newer vehicles do emit less. We're not at the zero-emission pickup truck yet, but eventually that could be phased into the program. But is there anything kind of that gets us there, or a step in between?
Yeah, no, I follow your question. And again, the short answer is there are other programs. But coming back to what we're here for is these are greenhouse gas reduction fund investments, right? Yes, a newer car has lower emissions, but it still has emissions. What we're trying to do with these investments is to get us over to this transformation where eventually we will have no emissions. So this is just a matter of the priorities for this particular program, where as we reach lower income disadvantaged communities, we're still trying to move the needle towards no combustion. And again, that's just the way that the program is. The priorities for the investments are defined such that we can get there.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking of the car program, because your hybrids also they're not zero emission either.
Correct.
Unless you have a purely electric, but that seems to be an intermediary step for passenger vehicles. We just don't have it for pickup trucks, which in my district does reflect low and moderate income families. I believe Mr. Quirk has a question.
Yes. So with the so-called zero-emission vehicles, they're, of course, not zero-emission. They're zero emission perhaps at the tailpipe, but well to wheels, hydrogen in particular, hydrogen fuel cell is, you're talking about half the emissions of the typical gas vehicle today. With electric, you're talking about a third of the greenhouse gas emissions. Now, if you could take an 83 truck that's getting 10 miles a gallon and replace it with a 2016 truck that's getting 20, you'd certainly have the greenhouse gas emissions. That seems to me it might be a reasonable thing to look at for very low income. Certainly not for upper income, but certainly for very low income, particularly if they've got a legitimate reason to have a truck for business.
Certainly, yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you at all. And again, I would remind you that was essentially the clunkers program that the federal government put in place, essentially getting better efficiency out of still conventional technology. The priorities that we've specified working through the public process for this particular program is one where we are still, I come back to my point, this is about the transformation of the fleet. And for that, we've defined these transformative technologies to be very specifically these future, more advanced technologies, cars that don't rely on combustion solely, that start to rely on alternative fuels, alternative power plants.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Mr. Lackey, please.
Yes, I was intrigued by one of the programs you mentioned that I know very little about but would be extremely popular in my district, where we have a very, very high percentage of commuters who go to work. I live in a rural area where we have over 100,000 vehicles or people that commute between 30 and 80 miles each way. And it's the car sharing program. And I would be very interested to find out more about that car sharing program, because I think that it has the potential to be very popular and easy to implement in comparison to some of these other programs, would cost less, and especially to the lower and middle income people, wouldn't require an expense per se. And so I would be very, very interested in learning more about the car sharing program, because I think it has great application to our district situation and challenge.
No, we share that excitement, and that was exactly the reason why we decided to go there. Car sharing has potential because, again, it's a reflection of this idea that we have about the broader transformation of not just using the car, but mobility in general. And in many cases, like in your district, the solution may not necessarily be just replacing a car with another car. It may be coming up with these alternatives. It's very exciting. I think the two projects that we are going to be kicking off soon are going to be great experience in terms of taking some really good lessons. And again, to the extent that we can, we want to grow those projects.
Okay, and I will just take it as coincidence that for the car sharing program, we're starting in Los Angeles and San Diego, where our speaker and pro tem reside. If we could expand to other areas, that'd be fantastic. Mr. Hadley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ayala, thank you for being here today. Two related questions around these programs. I'd like to step back a little bit to talk about both the costs and the benefits of the program for low and moderate income residents of California. In many ways, the biggest single cost that we're passing on to low and moderate income residents is the increased price of fuel in transportation that they are incurring as a result of cap and trade. Then we are trying to share some of the benefits of the funding that results from cap and trade. So my overall question for you is, does the ARB rank these expenditures, the various programs that are funded out of this cap and trade, on the basis of carbon reductions per dollar spent? And is it possible that the best way to both achieve our carbon emission goals and benefit low and moderate income Californians is to make sure that the cap and trade funding is spent on the most productive sources of carbon reductions, and then to shrink the size of the program so that the most marginal benefit expenditures are replaced with reduction in the price of fuel that low and moderate income households pay?
If you don't mind, I'm gonna ask Ms. Marvin to address the broad question, because the low carbon transportation program that we administer at the Air Board, we abide by the same guidelines that apply to expenditures for every other state agency. So there's no distinction in terms of the guidelines we follow. And at the core of the guidelines that Cynthia is responsible for is the question that you're raising about looking at the benefit, cost-benefit analysis, identifying greenhouse gas reduction benefits.
The process of deciding where to recommend investments that come to the legislature for budget decisions is really a two-part process. So it's the triennial investment plan. As Alberto mentioned, we just completed that process with a lot of different public meetings and input. In that process, we look and see where do we think there's the potential for transformation to a much lower carbon economy, whether it's in the transportation and housing area, it's in the energy area, energy and water, or it's in a natural resources and waste area. And so that investment plan looks at each one of those. Each of the agencies that's responsible for those programs does its own identification of where there are gaps in funding and where we think that this funding would have the potential to result in the most transformation. In some cases, it's the most cost-effective projects. In some cases, in the early stages of bringing a new technology to market and getting it out there, it is more expensive in the early years, but what you're trying to do is get over that hurdle and create the opportunity for that technology to become commonplace. And so there's a range of different investments on natural resources, for example. We may put money in, and it may take several years before you start to see benefits, but you may reap benefits for 50 plus years as a result of what happens in the natural environment. So the investment plan sets the stage for that, and then in the annual budget we have the proposals that would explicitly direct funds to different programs. It's not strictly a cost effectiveness test. It is a weighing and a balancing of all of these different factors consistent with the legislation. AB 1532 is the main bill that directs how we govern, how we develop the investment plan, and then it is the governor and the Department of Finance that make the budget proposal to you all. So ARB is involved, and we staff the process. ARB doesn't decide, where the money is recommended to go. That's really, of course, your decision and the governor's.
And are the deliberations or the conclusions in terms of a near-term and a longer-term benefit in carbon reduction per dollar, per $1,000 invested, are those public documents?
So the document that will be coming, I think that will be most useful to address your question, will be the annual report that you'll get next month that will show you what dollars have we invested in what programs, what are the greenhouse gas reductions that we're achieving, what are the benefits in disadvantaged communities, and then what are the important co-benefits that each of those projects are achieving. So I believe that will give you the statistics that you're looking for.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I think the whole goal is, right, getting the most bang for our buck, or how we can be most effective with these dollars to actually get towards our goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I think that's where you'll find some synergy, I think, with the legislature, especially as it applies to a vast majority of Californians when we're looking at the income levels. And really, as defined by the Cal Enviro screen, those communities that are more adversely affected just because of geography and other factors. I believe Mr. Rodriguez had a question.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the programs you're describing here, and in particular, the area I represent more of the Inland Empire in Los Angeles, San Bernardino counties. We really don't hear a lot about this, and obviously it's one big area of the greatest need. So we talk about these income levels and disadvantaged communities, but I would say it's roughly about 30,000, 40,000 average household income. And yeah, the rebates are there, but these families are the type that hold on to their vehicle as long as they can until they're no longer used. So we get them a vehicle, give them these vouchers, but they're still stuck with, I don't know, over $10,000, $15,000 that they got to pay when they're barely struggling to make their ends meet, right? They can barely afford their house payments, food on the table, clothes on their backs, but yet here they got to get rid of this vehicle. We're trying to wind them off it, and then now they're stuck with a $400 or $500 a month payment on a vehicle. So there's still a lot more work that needs to be done, right? And how do we can really work with these families, work with these communities, because we can throw away all these things about low income, disadvantage, all these things out there, but what does it really mean to those families that are struggling just to put food on the table, and they have that one vehicle, like Assemblyman Rosales said, hey, they depend on this truck, and now that we got to kind of force them into a vehicle that really isn't something they need. And with that, how many low income families have really qualified for a zero-emission vehicle?
No, thank you for the opportunity to provide clarification. I think those are great questions, and I do have the statistics, so I can share that with you. So 96% of the participants in the EF&P Plus app, so I'm going to focus on that, 96% of the participants, and I talked about the 300 plus program participants we've had, 96% are below the federal poverty level at 225%, which means that these are a family of four that makes no more than $54,000. So 96% of the families that are participating in the program are in the category that you described. There's no question we have challenges, and frankly, that is one of the reasons the program, as is rolled out, is resource intensive, because we need to work with the families on a case-by-case basis. But the signs are there that this can work, because we have 96% of our participants that actually are people like the ones that you represent. We want to do more. We want to do much better than that. And what we are doing right now is looking at the program and how to most effectively deploy these incentives for these folks, because we understand that this is a challenge in terms of the technology being costly and what have you. But at the same time, the market is evolving. The cars are going to be cheaper. There's going to be a used market that is going to grow and hopefully be a good source of some of these options for these folks. So all of these are questions that right now we are paying very close attention to. I personally have been in your area, and we have had some success. Again, it's probably not as many as we would like to see, but we're definitely going to get there.
So it goes back to my question. So what are we actually doing to advise my community, or any community for that matter, on these programs that are available? I mean, can you tell me specifically?
Yeah, that's why it's so critical for us at the Air Board to work with our partners at the local districts, because they are the ones, being the fact that they're local. I mean, they have programs to reach the community. They have the mechanism in place to be able to do the education and outreach that is needed. They have the relationships with the folks, the contractors, the entities that know the communities well, that know where to go, when to go, how to set up a program to do this. So specifically is working through the districts to implement these mechanisms to reach out.
But you don't really answer my question. How, though? I mean, are there brochures? How are they making the outreach to the community?
An example, there would be a community event held on on a weekend, and the community event will be on a number of areas, and there would be district or contractor representatives there with a table handing out information to folks. Another example would be at local through local entities, churches, that sort of thing, where they have the connection to the community and the people that we're trying to reach. And again, it's the local districts that have those programs in place, because they use this mechanism not just for our programs. I mean, they have to use them for several other things.
Can you find out when they're next having so many events like that in my district? Let me know.
Absolutely. We'd be happy to do that. We always welcome participation from representatives, because obviously that enhances the program.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.